Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time, Masechet Batra. This is actually our second to last class, and today we are going to be reviewing Daf 163 to 168, and Be'ezrat Hashem next week we are going to finish the Masechet together. Okay, today on Daf 163, we've been discussing how one writes a document. What does it look like? How is it signed? So on Daf 163, it tells us that the witnesses cannot leave two blank lines and then sign the documents. And then the question is, what does that mean, two blank lines? Is it two blank lines with the airspace in between? Some say it's the handwriting, the width of the handwriting of the witnesses, not the width of the handwriting of the scribe. Again, don't forget, the scribe is going to have much smaller handwriting. And therefore, we have to figure out what the space that we're allowed to leave is going to look like. So the Gemara discusses, let's say you wrote the word lech, right? So it has a lamed that goes up and a chaf sofit that goes down. So that gives us extra space. And then underneath it, you wrote again, lecha, right? So again, a lamed and a kaf. So that is two lines, but you have airspace above and below. So it's two written lines with four air spaces. Another option is it's a lamed on the first line, so that gives you the airspace above, and then a kaf on the second line. So that would be two written lines with three airspaces, or just one line with two spaces above and below. If in between the signature and the certification of the court, that's something that went under, that you can leave space in between. That would be valid because nobody writes anything under the witnesses. And then the scribe will put ink in between the space, and therefore you can't forge it. And they don't put ink in between the text and the witnesses, and therefore you can't leave a lot of space over there. Maybe a person so now the Gemara is going to talk about how can you forge a document, right? So maybe a person will cut off the text and the witnesses and then just write his own text and then have a forged witness statement, signature, and then he'll have the certification of the court, which goes under that. So the Gemara says, no, you would have to erase the ink marks. And again, anytime you see that it was erased, it becomes invalid, and you know that it's going to be forged. What about maybe the person might cut off the text and then write a new text and then write the new text where the witnesses are on the same line. And therefore, right, you can't leave any blank line between the text and the witnesses. And the Gemara says, therefore, if you see a document with one line of text and then witnesses, that's not valid because you know something is fishy over here. If you have one line of text and then a witness signs right next to it and then more witnesses under, again, invalid. You never have witnesses signing on the same line as the text itself. But if you have, okay, then the Gemara says, what about if you have a document and then the witnesses signed on the parchment, but it was like erased underneath? So the Gemara says that's valid. We're not concerned that it was forged because, again, you can tell if something was erased once or twice. So Daf 164 tells us that witnesses are only allowed to sign on a document if it was erased in front of them. But if it wasn't, so then they're not allowed to sign it. Maybe only the area of the signatures was erased, but the text was written on a blank parchment. And so that's a problem, because then a person will erase the text and write a new text. So the Gemara says, no, the witnesses have to write, we signed on an erased area, but the text wasn't erased, right? It has to be very clear what they're signing. Okay, you can bring another parchment to compare what one erasure looks like versus two erasures. The Gemara says no, because each parchment has a different thickness, so you never know what it's going to look like. Also, you can't compare things that were erased today versus things that were erased yesterday. They're going to look different, and therefore it's hard to check if it was forged. Okay. Then the Gemara, if you remember last week, we talked about two types of documents. Pashut, a regular document, or mikushar, the one that was folded and sewn. So the date on the pashut is different than the date on the mikushar. The date of the pashut is based on the king's reign. The date of the mikushar, if it's the first year of the king's reign, you would write the second year. This is the way the non-Jews counted, and therefore there's a difference between the dating in the two types of documents. Therefore, the Gemara says, how could, if you remember last week, we learned that if the witnesses sign on the inside of a document that was supposed to be folded, you just make it into a plain document. But the Gemara says, wait a minute, how could you do that? It's a different date. So the Gemara now gives stories of issues with the date on the document. So like Rebbe wasn't familiar with the way the Mikushar was dated, but then he heard of a certain case and then he learned how things were dated. A get Mikushar came to Rebbe and it didn't have a date on it. And then someone blamed someone else and Rebbe said, stop speaking Lashon Hara. And then someone complimented another person, and he says again, stop speaking Lashon Hara. So the Gemara explains how are both of those Lashon Hara, and we say that you shouldn't speak excessively good about someone because it might lead you to speak badly about that person. Continuing, the Gemara says there are three sins that people will encounter every single day. One is thinking about sin. The second is trouble with concentrating on tefillah. And the third is Lashon Hara, right? It's something that we deal with all the time. Okay, Daf 165, we have the concept of minhag medina, right? The custom of the area. So what does that mean? If there was a place that only did a simple document and the scribe did a folded document, then it's not valid, and vice versa. But if the minhag, the custom, is both, let's say a person told the scribe to write a simple document and the scribe wrote a folded document. So now, again, so the scribe didn't do what they asked, but in that place, they do both types of documents. So it's a machloket if that document is valid. Maybe he only wanted that and he was saying, this is what I want, but maybe he was just giving him like advice. I think that you should do this. This is called mar'eh makom, right? Mar'eh makom hulo. I'm just like, I think maybe you should make a get pashut, but it doesn't mean I only want a get pashut. And here the Gemara talks about this concept of when you tell someone to do something, do you mean that in particular, specifically, or in general, this is what I would prefer, but I don't really care, right? So we actually have this in Kiddushin, right? When you said it, when a woman said, she thought she was getting silver, but he sent gold. So maybe it's valid. Great, get gold. It's better. Or no, she thought she was getting silver. So only accept silver because that's what she wanted. Okay, we said if a mikushar is supposed to have 3 witnesses. If it has 2 witnesses, it's invalid. So the Gemara says we needed to teach this, but a pashut, a regular one, obviously it needs 2. If it has 1, it's invalid, right? Because we never have 1 witness on anything. So why would we think that it would be valid? So the Gemara says even if 1 signed it and 1 verbally attested to it, it's still not valid, meaning you need 2 to sign. Or another opinion is that would be valid, right? And here this is talking about another machloket, which is can testimony combine, right? Let's say 1 witness testifies on Sunday and 1 witness testifies on Monday. Can they combine? Some say it depends if they come to the same court or a different court. Maybe we can combine judges from different courts, just like you can combine witnesses. Or no, only judges can combine, but not witnesses. And since we're talking about judges, so now we have a case, let's say there were 3 judges and 1 of them died. How do they sign the document, right? We were 3 judges, but now we're only 2. And that is a way that they could sign the document. Okay, the Mishnah now on Daf 165 tells us, let's say we have a document that says, you owe 100 zuz, which is 20 slaim. Now, that's not true. 100 zuz is not 20 slaim. It's actually 25 slaim. So the question is, how much can you collect? Can you collect 100 zuz or 20 slaim, right? So again, the document says 2 contradictory things. Which one do we go according to? Let's say it says, so the Mishnah says you can only collect 20. Okay, let's say it says you owe 100 zuz, which is 30 slaim. Again, 100 equals 25. So now you have 100 or 30, which is more. The Gemara says you only get 100. Okay, let's say it says silver zuzim, but we don't know how much. It doesn't give a number. So you can only collect 2, right? The minimum amount of zuzim, because it's plural, is 2, right? And we're going to see basically this Mishnah says you are only allowed to collect the minimum amount. The Mishnah continues. Let's say the top of the document says 100, and later on in the document it says 200, or the opposite, 200 and then 100. You go according to what's on the bottom, right? Because the bottom is generally a repetition, and they must have changed their mind halfway through writing the document. Okay, that's the Mishnah on the bottom of 165. Now the Gemara explains, right? Let's say you just wrote the word kesef, right? Silver. So you can collect 1 silver dinar. Let's say it said dinarim, so you can collect 2, right? Kesef bit dinarim means the minimum is 2 gold dinarim value in silver. Let's say you wrote matbea, that means a coin, and all the things that we just said, the same thing works with gold, right? So here, the Gemara is discussing what happens when you are not clear in the contract. We are going to take the minimum value that would make sense in the document. Daf 166 tells us, right, if you write silver bid dinarim, so it's 2 silver dinars value in gold, right? And as we said, we always go according to the lowest value. Here, the Gemara tells us that there are 2 different words. Dinare means gold, dinarin means silver, right? So again, it's very important when interpreting what the document means. We have to know what the words mean. Let's say a woman. So how do we know that dinare means gold and dinarin means silver? So there's a story. about Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. He was very sensitive to what was going on economically for the people. So there's a law that says that if a woman is in doubt about miscarrying, and a woman miscarried a few times, let's say she miscarried 5 times, or she was a zava 5 times, she would have to bring 5 sacrifices. But here she's not sure if she's obligated in 5 sacrifices. So if she brings 1 sacrifice, she's seen as pure, and now she can eat from the sacrifices, and she doesn't have to bring 4 more because of this doubt. But if it was for sure that she had 5 miscarriages, when she brings 1, she can now eat from the sacrifice, but she still needs to bring 4 more sacrifices. One time, the price of the birds was so expensive that the value was 1 gold dinar per sacrifice, and it was very expensive. So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, listen, this is too much. The people can't handle it, and therefore, instead of it being gold, right, he said it has to go down to the value of 1 silver dinar. Obviously, silver is worth much less than gold. And therefore, he taught in the Beit Midrash, right? How is he going to lower the value of the bird? He taught in the Beit Midrash that this woman that we just mentioned can bring 1 korban, 1 sacrifice, instead of 5. Right? And now what happens? Everyone needs to bring much fewer birds. Therefore, there's much less demand. Therefore, right, the price has to drop. And then, right, and that's how he lowered the market value. And the Gemara talks about the word dinare and dinarim. Okay. Back to our documents. If there's a discrepancy of 1 letter between the top and the bottom of the document in the name, that's okay, but not 2 letters. Because, right, maybe like Avrami or Avraham, right? Like if they took off 1 letter and added another letter, so maybe it's like a nickname, but if it's off by 2 letters, that's not okay. Again, let's say there's a discrepancy in the text. We go according to the bottom of the document. Okay, let's say the document said you owe 600 plus 1. So what does that mean? Right? We don't know what type of coin it is. We don't know what we're talking about. So the Gemara says, could it mean 600 cents? So the Gemara says, oh, right, prutot. The Gemara says, that's not the way we speak, right? We don't say you owe me 600 cents, right? You would say you owe me $6. So the Gemara says we go according to zuz, right? That is the lowest reasonable denomination, right? So if we're speaking in English, in American currency, we would say dollars, right? People don't say you owe me 500 dimes or 500 quarters, right? You'd say $500 or $5. The same thing with shekel. Okay, DAF 167. If someone wants to put his signature to be filed away in the court so they know what his signature looks like, you don't write it at the bottom of a piece of paper because we're concerned maybe it'll get lost and someone will write on top, you owe me $100 and Tamara or whatever, right? Yosef ben Menachem says that he attested to it. So you always have to write it at the top of a piece of paper. And actually someone once tried this and then someone asked for a sample, right? Like when you're kids and you ask your parents, can you just sign this piece of paper? And then on the top it says, please excuse my daughter from, school today, right? So already from the time they've been doing this for 2,000 years, right? So someone tried to get someone's signature and then forge a document, but they realized and they caught him. Another thing with a document, the Gemara says, don't write the word 3, right, in Aramaic, tlat, from 3 till 10 at the end of a line, because people can always add an extra letter, right? So tlat in Aramaic means 3, but tlatin, right? If you add a yud and a nun, it means 30, right? So like 14, right? But it doesn't work with 15, right? So certain words you can add, right? Like 4T, right? You can just add a letter and it becomes, right, much larger sum of money. So you have to be very careful that it's not at the end of the line so that nobody adds letters. And therefore, you should repeat the number a few times in the text of the document so that you'll see exactly how much a person owes. Someone brought a document and it said tilta bit pardes, right, which means 3 for an orchard. But then, right, it said bit pardes with a bet, right, and then they erased the top and the bottom of the bet, right, because it looks like a half a square. You erase the top and the bottom, and then you just get tilta, right, 3 vip pardes, and an orchard, right? But what happened, right? I guess people have been forging documents for thousands of years, right? Then they brought it to court, and Abaye said, why is there so much space between the vav and pardes, right? Because you got rid of the end of the letter. So he realized that it was a forgery. The same thing, another example, someone said, Minat Ruvain Vishimon Achi, right? So you get the estate of Ruvain and Shimon, my brother. The problem is that they also had a third brother and his name was Achi. So they just added a vav and they said, you get the property of Ruvain, Shimon, and Achi. And then they said, wait, why is there like so little space between the vav? And they realized that it was forged, right? So everything needs to be evenly spaced in the document. Okay, next Mishnah. When you write a get for a husband, the scribe can write a get for the husband, even if the wife isn't there, and he can write a receipt for the wife, even though the husband isn't there, as long as the scribe knows everybody's names and the husband pays for the get. This is all about who needs to be present at the writing and who pays. Okay, so you can write a document for a loan without the lender, right? The borrower is saying, I owe so-and-so $100, so he can do that. But you can't write a document without the borrower, right? The lender can't say, I lent Tamara $100. What do you mean? How do you know? Maybe he's making it up, right? And the borrower is the one who pays for the document. You can write a document of sale without the buyer, right? The seller can say, I'm selling this piece of land. You cannot write it without the buyer. You cannot write it for the buyer without the seller, right? Because I can say, I bought Zohar's house for $1,000. Really? Zohar didn't say that she sold me her house, right? So the seller always has to be there, and the buyer has to pay for the contract. You only write a betrothal document, t'naim, with both parties present, the bride and the groom pays for it. And then a document of a sharecropper, again, they both need to be there, and the sharecropper pays. And a document of berurin, we don't know what that is yet, the Gemara is going to explain. Both parties need to be there, and they split the fee. Or you write a document for each one of them. And again, the Gemara is going to explain what that means. So now the Gemara explains, a scribe needs to know the name for the person commissioning the document, right? And then the Gemara says, wait a minute, he doesn't need to know both of them, let's say the husband and the wife. And he says, you're right. You need to know both of the names so that you can't forge a get, right? You need to know the husband and the wife. What happens if people have the same names in one city, right? Meaning, again, because you write the city. So let's say you have, right, Ben Sion and Tamara in Alon Shvut, if there was another Ben Sion and Tamara who live in Alon Shvut, now you have to be very careful who you're writing the get for, right? Everyone has to be, it has to be written in front of the husband and the wife. Everyone needs to know. Okay, you can't write a document for someone unless they've lived in that city for at least 30 days, right? We're concerned someone might move to a new city and say, hey, my name is Barbara. I just moved here. How are you? Oh, I want to buy your property, right? But we don't know who that person is. The Gemara talks about like calling out, their names and to see if, if they respond as a way of making sure they say who they are. Okay, Daf 168. Witnesses can only sign a document if they recognize both parties, right? They have to know, again, Tamara borrowed money from Zohar. You need to know who Zohar is. You need to know who Tamara is. Otherwise, I could just be making things up. We said that the husband needs to pay for the get. This is based on a verse. In the times of, now, it's a very interesting, okay? So in the times of the Gemara, they actually said that it's the woman who needs to pay for the get. Now you might think, oh, I can't believe it. Why are they making the woman pay for the get? But it's the opposite of what you think, right? Because what happens if you say that the woman can pay for the get? So now the husband doesn't have a way to stall, right? The husband can say, oh, I don't really want to pay for all those expenses. So the Gemara said, no, the woman has the right to pay for it, right? Because I would imagine any woman would be like, I will pay for the scribe to write the get, just give me my get. So I think it's fascinating. This, I think, is just a great example of, you might be like, oh, I can't believe the Gemara is making someone pay for something else, but really it has their vested interest in mind. Okay, with an investment, you might think that because the lender also benefits, maybe he has to also pay for the writing of the document. And the Gemara says, no, the borrower always pays for the writing of the document. If a person sells a bad field, even though the buyer always, even if the seller is selling a bad field, the buyer always pays for the scribe to write the document. We say that even if the groom is a Talmid Chacham, right, who doesn't have a lot of money, he's a scholar, he's a student, he still needs to pay for the document of betroth, of Erusin, of Tnaim. And even if a sharecropper can't plant in the field for a few years, he still is obligated to pay for the document. We said a shtar birurin. What is that? So the Gemara says it's a record of the claims of each litigant, or it's when the litigants agree on choosing a judge. So here the Gemara says, right, can you force people to pay for documents that they are going to hold on to? Therefore, Rabban Gamliel says, actually, each one should pay for their own document so that they each get a document for themselves. Okay, next Mishnah. A person borrowed money and he paid back some of it, right? So he borrowed $100. He paid back 50 and then took the IOU and gave it to a third party. And then he said to the third party, if I don't pay back the other $50, so you can give the IOU back to the lender and I'll owe him $100. Let's say he doesn't pay the $50 in time. Can the third party give the document back to the lender? So one opinion says yes, and the person obligated himself to pay $100, right? Basically 50 more, or no, you can't give it back. And here is a very famous machloket about asmachta kanya, right? It's an Aramaic word, which means when someone, let's say, exaggerates, right? Of course, I'll pay back double if I don't pay in time, right? Do they really mean it? and therefore they're obligated to pay it? Or do they not really mean it? And they're just trying to say, don't worry, trust me. And that's the machloket. The law is that it is a valid statement, or maybe the law is that it's not. It's a machloket. Okay, last Mishnah for today. Let's say you have an IOU document that got erased. You can bring witnesses and you go to the court and they authorize the document. So now the Gemara explained, right? What do they write? They write, the three of us saw, right? The three judges saw this document that was erased, and these are the witnesses that signed on it, right? So they authenticate the document. If they investigated who the witnesses are, so then the person can just take the IOU and collect their money with it. If they didn't authenticate the signatures, so you still need to authenticate the signatures. Let's say you have a ripped document. So it says if it's ripped, it's still valid, right? You know, like when you have like a tear in in a dollar bill, does it work or not? So if it's ripped, it's valid. If it's torn by the court, so then it's invalid. So now the Gemara explains, if it's ripped through the names or through the amount that you owe, then it's torn by Beit Din and it's not valid. Or another example is that it's like torn like lengthwise and widthwise. That's something that the court would do. But if it's just ripped accidentally, it's still a valid document. So there was once this place where these Arabs were seizing land, and the people wanted to have two sales documents, right? So in case they took one, they would have like a backup. But the Gemara says, no, that's not okay. You're not allowed to have two documents for one piece of land. And the Gemara is going to explain that. We'll talk about it next week. And a person says that they lost their document. You don't write another one. Now, the Gemara says that's only for a loan. You don't write another document. But for a sale document, you actually can write another one, or maybe you cannot write another one. And the last line on the top of Daf 169 is the discussion about a gift that's given and the document or the contract that comes with it, right? So if you give a gift document back and you say, oh, no, thank you, but you just gave the document, then do you have to return the gift or not? Meaning, are they linked together or not? And that is a machloket. And with this, we actually finish our second to last class of Bava Batra. So thank you, everyone. Sorry for the confusion. I hope it was clear. Was it okay?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Next time, remind me if it's ever not clear to just use my phone, because then it doesn't matter if I have internet or not. I just use my phone as a hotspot. We have a few minutes, so if anybody has any questions or comments, I'm happy to entertain them. Yes.
I just wanted to say it's been, Friday will be 12 months since my father passed away.
Wow.
So I don't know if we should say Lilu Nishmat, but
Wow.
Menachem-
Wow.
Menachem-
He should have, his neshama should have an aliyah, and all of our learning should be in his memory, and you should have nechama, and we think about you, and I'm happy that we were able to learn together through this entire process. But
So it's not
Sorry, I didn't catch who passed away.
my father 12 months ago.
It's Yiskor.
So it's not his yahrzeit because it was a leap year, so the yahrzeit is in Tevet, but it's 12 months. So the Avelut ends this week, but we're only going to go up to the Kever next month. So
wow. So remind us again when we're by the actual yahrzeit, and we will again learn in his memory.
Thank you.
You should have nechama.
Thank you.
Wow. Okay. Well, wishing everyone a Shavua Tov. Thank you for coming back on and being very flexible. I appreciate it.
This was recorded, right?
Yes, everything is
Okay,
recorded.
so they'll have
And
to join. Yeah.
sorry for the craziness. And I think that next week we're learning on Tuesday at our regular time, or maybe not. I'm gonna send an email because I think Web Yeshiva wanted to do something as either as a looking back at the Babas or looking forward to Sanhedrin. I'm not sure. So please check your email for exact dates and times.
Thank you.
And thank you for all of your flexibility.
I have a different share on Tuesdays, but
Tomorrow.
sometimes it gets canceled for whatever reason, and Magid share can't make it. So whether
Okay.
it's there or not, we'll see. Just listen to the recording. Bezrat Hashem.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something? No? Okay. So Shavua Tov, everyone.
Thank you.
Well.
Bye.
Bye.